What's up, everyone? Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My two guests today are Adam Jacques, Chief Geneticist for ZED Therapeutics, and Chris West, the Director of Cultivation for ZED Therapeutics. Adam Jacques and Chris West. Man, I'm excited to have you guys on today to talk genetics. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Great. Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. I've been doing research online, and from what I've read, you two are considered to be some of the founding fathers of CBD genetics in North America. I know it's a bold statement, but I can't wait to hear about all the different work that you've been doing. We know that largely a lot of the widespread emergence of CBD that we see in today's marketplace is due to y'all's research and what studies you've been showing and the work you've been doing with the cannabis and the hemp plant. So why don't you talk about your backgrounds, how you started working together, so that our audience gets a better understanding of who you are.
Yeah. Well, as far as my background, I started growing cannabis at a pretty young age, 20 some odd years ago, and just quickly got really enamored by all of the different genetics available out there. I spent a lot of my time collecting different genetics from California and anywhere really on the West Coast or through the mail, however I could get them, and just I grew every different kind of plant as far as cannabis goes, everything that you could imagine, indicas, sativas, and everything in between. Lots of times ended up having a grow room with 20 plants and 17 different strains in it. So I got a lot of experience seeing how much variation there really is in the genetics from one side to the other, and how different genetics, first how they grow, their different growth patterns and different nutritional desires and whatnot, and then secondly what different chemotypes or cannabinoid profiles we get out of them, and how that affects your mind and your body when you use the cannabis.
So you're saying that would be the first step, would be to first understand how that particular genetic grows, to then understand the cannabinoid profile and the medical benefits.
Yeah, exactly. You get what's called phenotypical expression. When you grow a plant, its environment affects the expression of its genes and how it grows, and that in turn affects what compounds you get out of it, both cannabinoids, terpenes, and then affects your yield. And really you can see a clone of the exact same genetic come out in two very different formats. You'd see the same basic cannabinoid profile, but maybe different quantities of each one.
Got you. And Adam, how about you, sir? Tell us a little bit about how you got started in this field and what you're working on.
So I I've been involved in cannabis since I was a teenager. So
The
the
black market cannabis.
yeah, well, and it's just one of my, if not one of my, it's probably my, other than my family and maybe fishing, it's my favorite thing in the world. I was also very interested in the different genetic expressions of cannabis and what that looked like. So way back when we first started growing, there was a very limited amount of genetics that were accessible to the average person. And getting genetics and new genetics was extremely, one, risky, and two, tricky. A lot of people didn't want to give up cuts of things, or there wasn't a lot of sharing going on back then. Cannabis, from when Chris and I started to where we're at now, was a completely different world. So it was trying to make connections and find new genetics. And so I just kind of got to the point where it was such a hassle finding new things, and I knew what I was looking for, that I just started breeding plants together to create my own genetics. back when I started, it was very throw it at the wall and see what sticks kind of mentality. Lots of just testing, growing things out, seeing how they looked, how they responded, how they react. And then a part of that, after I kind of worked through what I had and was doing that, like more genetics were necessary to continue doing these projects. And so I found a guy that seemed to have just about every genetic that you could possibly think of. And so I got a hold of him, met up with him, got some genetics from him, and that was Chris. And this was quite a few years ago. And I was just blown away by the amount of different genetics that this one guy had all at the same time. And so then we started doing a lot of work together. It started with this is all medical back in these days. So
What
growing
year
out,
was this? How long ago was this?
oh, what is it now, Chris? It's 9 years.
Yep,
Years.
coming up on 10.
Yeah, we're old. Um, so yeah, so Chris and I did at that point we kind of, I mean, whether we knew it or not, we kind of partnered up at that point and started doing a lot of work together, opening what this is pre-medical dispensaries. So we opened up what's called a private club, and help medical patients that way. And then we moved into a real dispensary and real rec grows and rec stores and hemp farms and hemp genetics and hemp research and development. So in our time together, I think, I don't know that, we work on lights. We do, there really isn't a stamp on the cannabis card that Chris and I probably haven't hit together. We've been through a lot of different business entities and do a lot of consulting and work like that. So, and that's just kind of carried through. I'm to this day, kind of the focus is creating new, unique genetics for whether it be type 1, 2, or 3 markets. Right now, obviously, our major focus is the type 3 hemp market, and developing as many new, unique genetics as we can in that space and looking for different markers and different things that make individual plants unique, and then passing them along to Chris and the team and seeing how they can grow it out, the different methodologies of growing it out, and what kind of spikes that we see. Let's say between using HPS, double-ended LEDs, outdoor grows, what the nutrient requirements are, and things along those lines. So a lot of what we do now is genetic research and development and seed licensing for the hemp space, which is a long road from trading clones and lights in a parking lot.
Right. Well, it's always great to find a business partner that you just mesh well with. There's when there's good synergy there, you're gonna do great work. So it's great that y'all found each other and you're doing such good things. Um, I had one question to back up when you first said, so you found Chris and he was like the genetics guy. He had every genetics known to man. Is there a number to that? Like, do we have a one, a
Now
number
or
that,
then?
I guess for both, right? Like, I guess back then, was there a number, and have we created newer genetics, and what's that number look like today?
I
Back
mean,
in those days, I came from a different background than Adam. Really, I think I was really a clone guy and was really obsessed with collecting whatever cut was circulating around, which one was popular at the time, and which one was classic. And Adam was more along the seed line and finding new genetics and collecting genetics in seed form. And so I've through the years I've come around to the ways of seeds and breeding your own strains, and rather than trying to hold on to living plants. That was a big problem in my past. I'd have at one point over 150 genetics in just in my house in plant form, and just was really unmanageable. So it's been great putting some of those genetics into seed form to be able to hold on to them without having to keep them alive per se. And I mean, we have over 1,000 genetics in seed form for sure. I mean, just THC alone, probably over 1,000.
Yeah, and hemp in the hemp
Wow.
space now, unique hemp plants we're probably in the 12 to 1500 range. We need to definitely go through and work a bunch of things as far as grown out, tested, photographed, cataloged. We're at about 300 at the moment that have gone through the complete grow cycle, and about every 3 months we add another 150 to 200 to that list that we're working through. So we have this huge back catalog, and then type 2 genetics ratio. What do we got? Another 1,000 there. Um, so going through all these plants, working them, and then I have this addiction where I can't stop making new genetics. So every couple of months we add another, what, 50, 100 to the pile. But
What's
thousands.
the turnaround time for something like that when you're starting a new genetic? What from start to finish?
It matters what we're looking for. If we're like breeding for a specific cannabinoid or a specific type of cannabis, it's all genetics. So if we're breeding for a type 3 from a type 1 and a type 3, then you're looking at 3 cycles. So 8 months, 10 months. If you're looking at taking like a regular variety of hemp, let's say, and turning it into an auto flower, well, then that's going to be 4 cycles. So let's just say 3 months a cycle, so a year to create like a new auto genetic, like a new auto hemp. If I'm just looking to put 2 flavors together, like, like the Black Star Sherbet hemp we have and like the Einstein cookies hemp we have, that would take me about 3 months. And as we build more tools and change how we look at things, what we're really doing is developing a tool set of different genetics that we can plug and play different aspects of the plants together to create different varieties, let's say within one wheelhouse of a strain. So like making Black Star Sherbet a single stock auto flowering variety, or taking Gorilla Glue number 4 and diluting that down into diluting's the wrong word, but changing that into a hemp variety through selective breeding or something like that. It's really all dependent on what you're doing with those plants. But as far as making regular feminized seed, that's usually about a 3-month project per step. So I would say that some of our breeding projects have been carrying on, working on things. And I don't know that we're ever, I think me and Chris are the same way. I don't know that we're ever truly happy with what we have. And I think that's why we work so good together, because we just keep on trying to make it better and better and better and better. And as far as like the hemp market goes right now, I don't see anything like what we have. And for everybody else, that's the top of the mountain. But for us, I think we've just started the climb on what we're looking to do in that space. And so, like Frank's gift, when we started working with that, and what was that, Chris? That the same 8 7 8 years ago. I'm still not done with that. So it's just dependent on what you're looking for and when you're happy with your end result. And so years, months
Yeah.
to get some seeds made, but
A
years to get
lifetime. Take a
something that you're
lifetime.
stoked on.
Right. There's a lot that you threw out there, so I want to unpack some of it. So first, let's talk about like how you said hemp is like the top of the mountain right now when it comes to like genetic seedlings for hemp, right? And the reason for that, I mean, there's a couple of reasons, but the primary reason is that you don't want your crop to go hot or go over that 0.3 THC percentage line, right? Um,
So there's a kind of a misconception out there about plant varieties and plant types, and it's all based on a 1970s test, and it was a leaf sample test that industrial hemp is 0.3% CBD, and this is what denotes industrial hemp. But when we're looking at what we would call CBD rich or CBD dominant plants, or what's commonly known as type 3 genetics, hemp genetics, um, they're all CBD dominant, THCs kind of knocked out. And when you're growing things optimally, so the higher your CBD percentage goes, the higher your THCA is going to go. It's just a basic function of the plant. So you can get some ratios that look better than other ratios, or but in the end, any type 3 plant, as far as I'm concerned, is a hemp plant, even if it is above 0.3%. There's
And it's because of that THCA, which is a UVB protectant, right? I mean, that's
that is
what.
absolutely correct.
So that's what I mean. For the audience that doesn't know, that is what protects the plant from UV sun rays, right? UV
Correct.
sunlight,
Right.
and
That
it's just a
is,
natural part of the plant.
it is a natural function of the plant for it to survive. Now, we can create plants, like we have plants in our library that don't produce THCA in certain parts of the plant. And what those plants are, they're like half regular photosynthesizing green plants, and the other part is albino. And if you test the albino pieces of the plant, they'll come up with a mutated THCA that isn't where THCA is supposed to be, so therefore non-detectable. Well, obviously, if you were growing a full plant that was albino like that, it would die because of the UVB rays. It would kill the plant. It has no way to protect itself. And so that's possible. But you get a lot of these comments of I've got this strain that's X and non-detectable THC. Well, it's just that's not how it works. Send it to our lab. Let us look at it. There's THCA in there. And really what we're finding is that all grown under the same conditions, same lights, things like that, the THCA is going to rise alongside the CBD.
Right.
So we have a 20, we have some strains that are way in the high 20% of CBD. They're almost always going to have about 1% of THCA in it. So that's problematic with the legislation that's currently on the books. So they're saying that type 3 isn't hemp, only 0.3 is hemp. And hemp's such a weird word because it's all just a cannabis plant, right?
Right.
So then Chris is working with different methods of growing, and I'll let him elaborate on it, but you can use different nutrients and different ways to actually lower your THCA count in the plants. It's just ways of manipulating your THC to go lower. But in a naturally occurring plant, it's just always going to have some THCA in it. As far as harvesting guidelines go, it's 14 or 30 days before. Generally, any type 3 plant's going to test fine under the current guidelines. It's just when it goes to secondary market as flower, so it's been trimmed, cured, all of that. That's where you're going to see most of these varieties go above that 0.3 mark, but most people are just turning into oil, diluting it into products, and being well below that THCA point.
And
One of the
wasn't.
problems with
Oh, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
in hemp and people's general understanding of it is that the laboratories have a testing threshold for THC and CBD, and it varies from lab to lab. With a regular THC test, some labs, if you're under 0.1 percent THC by weight, then it's non-detectable because they're not searching for it below that threshold. Other labs, it's 0.03. But so when people see a cannabis test and they say, oh, well, this is non-detectable THC, well, it's exactly that. It wasn't detected, but it's not that it isn't there. It is there, just in a smaller amount.
Got you. That makes sense.
So some
And
of the things that we're looking at doing is testing the plant down to the quadrillionth to find minor cannabinoids or new molecules that haven't been discovered yet because they're produced in such small quantities in the plant, which is what we see with a lot of the minor cannabinoids like CBC and CBL and the CBDV and THCV. A lot of these plants are producing them in such small amounts that nobody ever knew they were there before.
And so is that something that you're working on a daily basis, is to start to understand some of those cannabinoids that we weren't able to identify or see previously?
Yeah, and one of our problems is, the genetic mapping of the plant has showed us some of the major genes that are responsible for THC and CBD production, and we're starting to understand how they work. But a lot of the minor cannabinoids, we have no idea what genes are contributing to them.
What's the criteria for something becoming a new strain?
Not much. as far as creating new genetics, getting them out into the space and doing research, what you really need to do is track the plant weekly, have a grow journal on that plant, so test results every week, photographs every week, and track that plant from the initial flip from vegetative state to bloom state all the way to the final week, and then you can have a roadmap of what this plant is and what it expresses when it expresses it, what that looks like. So really a really good understanding of the plant, how it grows under different conditions, what the inputs and environments are like. And then with that, you can prove your concept that the strain is what it's supposed to be. And then, but as far as in the cannabis industry as a whole, you know, most genetics are just kind of somebody's made this, here it is, grow it out and test it for yourself. Now there are some projects going through now with what you would be calling like registered hemp seed crops or seed seller certificates, the ability to send hemp seed internationally to different countries. And so really what you're looking at when you're doing that is understanding the laws of that country, what is needed to be within the rules of where you're sending that genetic, or the state where you're sending that genetic, and to meet those guidelines. In a lot of states, when you grow things out now, they have like a hot watch or a hot list. And if some genetic, let's say, I don't want to call anybody out, but let's say genetic XYZ gets out there and it tests hot in 80% of crops, they're going to put it on a list, like a worry list. Watch out for this genetic, or this genetic shouldn't be grown in our hemp program, and things along those lines. So there's not a ton of like true hemp genetics out there. A lot of the stuff that's out there currently is all derivative from the same genetic background, um, and they run more on reputation than on actual any lab testing or follow through with like registered seed types or anything like that. Really, the only thing we can do if like we want to get recognized that we have a new genetic, you go and get intellectual property on it and do like a seed patent, and then you can say, well, here's my patent for this plant. But as far as the creation of a new genetic, it's a lot like somebody creating tomato seeds or something. You do it, you show the proof of the work that you did, you show that that work is stable, and move on with your life. Stability in a plant is the idea of growing it from a seed state where the offspring of those seeds are 99% the same every time. You can't lock down a strain 100%, and that's done through a process. Generally, we do it through a process called cubing, where you're backbreeding a genetic for specific traits into itself 4 times, therefore making a cube. And once you can cube a genetic out and lock down those traits, you're generally at that 98, 99%. Everything's the same. So when you're talking about like a genetic and having it locked down, that would be the process of doing that.
Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. So thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. So I know you mentioned earlier, you talked about it's when you're wanting to develop a new genetic, it's first like, what do you want to do with the plant, right? What cannabinoids do you want to accentuate, or be the core, if you will? But do you think that recreational THC and the CBD boom has kind of hurt inhibited the way people understand the medical values of these cannabinoids?
Well, I think it's expanding the way people understand it more than anything, because we get acceptance and we get, yes, there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of misunderstanding, but that's only going to get better as we get more education programs in place. We have more people in a position to speak that have knowledge about the plant. We really are just waiting for the time when we can have THC legal nationally, so that we can have people learn. There's this big boom right now about cannabis and how wonderful it is and how it'll cure everything. And they're talking about CBD because basically that's what's legal for people to make money off of right now. And that itself does a disservice to the plant because CBD in its isolated form is not very effective as medicine. Um, and so I get the feeling that a lot of people will try CBD because it's becoming accepted and say, oh, well, that product didn't work for me, so cannabis is bunk, and not only are a lot of products on the market right now not what they claim to be, but they're also only CBD and just not effective.
Right. Yeah, that came up when Dr. Hildebrand was on, because he talked about how we need to reverse engineer how we think about this medicine. Even if you're going to a dispensary, for example, you walk in and they'll tell you, you're looking for something that makes you sleep or this and that and the other, and then they'll recommend a strain, as opposed to you coming in and saying, I want, a flower that has CBD, CBN, whatever the various cannabinoids are that help with different, medical issues. So,
Well, we're living in a world where 2/3 of what we do is federally, and we can't even really. Type 3 hemp is legal federally, which kicked the doors open for us as far as lab testing and running
and
multiple
let's talk about those type
varieties.
1 through type 3 hemp. Sorry to cut you off, but for our audience that doesn't understand, type 1, type 2, type 3, what are the differences there?
Type 1 is a high THC variety, so THC, very low CBD. Type 2 would be what's commonly called a ratioed variety, so that would be 1-to-1. It really, they'll express themselves anywhere from 3-to-1 to 1-to-3 THC to CBD in the ratio space, and then type 3 genetics are CBD dominant, only very little THCA. So type 1 and type 2 ratio and THC genetics are illegal at a federal level. In Oregon, they're legal, but only with a license unless you're a medical grower. And then you can grow them and do some work with them, but we're really hamstrung on how much work we can do in the type 1 and type 2 THC ratio space. In the hemp space, it's no holds barred. You can grow as much as you want. You can have as many plants as you want, as long as you're getting everything tested by the Department of Agriculture, that everything is legit and testing within the boundaries of the rules set by the Department of Agriculture. You can grow and work on as much as you want. So in the hemp space now, with the breeding projects, we've just been able to really increase how quickly we're able to look through different genetics, get those genetics tested. We can go through 1,000 plants a week looking at different things, culling ones, keeping ones, but we can work through plants so much quicker because we're not held to a plant count standard, and we're not held to, it's a completely different world when there's no regulations telling you can't grow 2,000 plants at a time or 5,000 plants at a time or a field of plants at a time. In the recreational space, doing these kind of research and development projects or genetic projects and things like that, it doesn't make much sense for those people because they're trying to make money off of cannabis sales to stores. And honestly, I assume it's the same in other states, but in Oregon, your ability to make money off of your recreational cannabis farm, there's a real thin line there between profit and failing at this point. It's an oversaturated market, and you really have to be on top of it. So you can't really spend your time doing research and development. You just have to do production. In the hemp space, I can take an extra room or an extra tent or some extra lights and do different projects and tests and looking at things without the worry of one, the business getting in trouble, or two, me personally getting in trouble. It's important for me and Chris at this point in our careers, now that we've been doing this for so long, to stay completely compliant with all of the rules of the land, federally and state. The last thing we want to do is ever put ourselves or anybody using our genetics into a position where they might get in some sort of trouble with any agency. And so that definitely hinders our work in the THC and ratio space. Not a ton. We're both medical growers for ourselves, so we get a little bit of leeway on what we're allowed to do and what we can grow and what we can look at. but nothing like the current type 3 hemp space. We can really kind of blow the doors off of things. We can work with universities, do trials with them, publish papers, work with a bevy of different companies to get the data and information that we're looking for, which was, it's just a huge game changer for us and how quickly we're able to evolve and change our genetics up.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned type 3 hemp being basically there's no limits, right? You can grow as many as you can handle, grow as many plants as you can handle within your farming operation. And it's interesting because I had Corbett Hefner on the podcast this last episode, and he kind of touched on so back up who Corbett is he's a VP of Formation Ag, which is one of the leading industrial hemp equipment companies in the world. And so what he was talking about when it comes to genetics is that there's some genetics that his equipment has dealt with where they just like for instance one crop grew as a globe, like a sphere, for this particular genetic strand, and so he had to re-engineer his equipment to actually harvest the plant. So do you have any conversations with like the Corbett's of the world who are in farming equipment or farmers to let them know like, hey, this might kind of alter what you've been doing in terms of farming operations?
Mostly what we've been working on is creating genetics to ease the strain of harvesting. So when we're talking about like our cattail autoflower genetics, these are varieties that are going to grow single stalk. The stalk's not going to get very woody during the growth phase, so it can be easily cut. They don't grow very tall, and they finish from seed to flower in 6 to 7 weeks. So you can do 3 harvests outside a year, but then when you're looking at like decking cutters and things like that, they don't have the big woody stalks on them. They're not large amounts of plant matter. They're all, imagine like Brussels sprouts. They're all just stalks in a field, singular. So you can go through with like a decking cutter and cut it like grass, kick it into the back of a truck, and make the harvest very easy. So as far as that goes, we've definitely been looking at how to create varieties that deal better with agricultural, like big ag farming equipment, and creating the ease. For me, I prefer more of a Christmas tree variety or like a globe type variety. I like the way that they grow. I like the way that they express themselves. But by the time you're done growing that for a whole season, you've made a tree, right? You have a large stalk, a decked cutter or combine. It's not getting through that. So what you're doing is going out and individually cutting stalks and hand loading into the back of machines. That's fine with a 5-acre grow or a 10-acre grow. But when you're talking a 500-acre grow or a 1,000-acre grow, you want people to be able to hop in their cab and drive the machine up and down the rows and collect all of the things. So whereas they're making strides on their side, developing equipment to do that more effectively within the hemp space, we're trying to make strides on our side to make genetics that are more favorable to those harvesting conditions.
And hemp's not a new product to the world by any means. I mean, hemp's been grown in large production for years and years and years, and all that equipment exists already. But that's more of what classically hemp was, which you find as a feral plant that grows in the single stalk, like Adam was saying. But the problem is it doesn't have any cannabinoids in it, or has very, very little cannabinoids. So it's been grown as a fiber crop and as a seed crop, a food crop. So we're trying to effectively, what we're doing is taking that form of the plant that's been grown and already has methodology to harvest and take to market, and just put cannabinoids into it so that it's worthwhile to make it extractable and get into the CBD market with it, which is where hemp is going, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a big disconnect here, because these large 1,000-acre plus farmers have been growing these industrial hemp strains for food and fiber, and the smaller scale growers have been growing the Christmas tree or round bushy varieties, and that's where all the harvesting problems come in.
Got you. That makes sense. So I know Adam mentioned that you guys have been working for over 9 years together, and you've just seen this industry just completely just go at lightning speed compared to where we are at now. So maybe talk a little bit about how the technology has evolved over the years.
Oh gosh, going from having to make covert trips to the grow store and not buy too much soil all at once.
Just
You know,
for tomatoes, dude.
yeah. And then going to where we had a little bit of legitimacy as medical growers, but you contact a supplier and they totally wouldn't work with you if they knew that it was cannabis related, even though you would be legal as a medical grower. Businesses are still afraid of it because of the stigma and because of the federal, the fact that it's illegal federally. And banks are the biggest problem. And none of the banks want to work with somebody that's in cannabis business because they're afraid of the IRS and federal ramifications. So it's been, like you said, a real whirlwind change of going from having to hide what we're doing constantly to actually being able to talk to vendors and tell them that, hey, we're growing hemp or we're growing recreational cannabis and we need a large supply of soil or nutrients or lights or whatever it is, and they're actually out there trying to find the best products for cannabis growers rather than trying to shy away from it. And so that's something that's been changing a lot more quickly now that hemp's accepted nationally, because we use the same products for THC cannabis and for hemp.
Yeah. And then to expand on that a little, like things like testing, like when, back in the day, the way you would test something is you would ingest it, you would smoke it, and then you would be like, well, has this effect to it and smells like this, and going from just being able to observe to actually get hard scientific data like on demand at our own facility. Like advances like that are crazy. They change our ability to work and advance things so much more quickly. And like Chris was saying, maybe like horticultural lighting has come so far in the past 5 years, and growing containers or different dirt mixes, and these, we were piecemealing things together from different industries and different ideas to try and build an effective grow. And now I get 50 emails a day in my email box from different companies trying to sell me the new hot grow tech, and this has all happened over the stretch of, really 5 years. I would like to say 10 years, but really the ball started rolling downhill about 5 years ago, where it felt like industry had really opened up. And then things like, to get information and to talk to your peers and stuff, it used to be, having some sort of anonymous username on a message board and talking to people on forums and things. And trying to stay as in the shadows as possible. And now, for the past 5 years, we do international speaking engagements and are on podcasts and in the, magazines and papers and television and radio shows and whatnot. And it's a huge change fundamentally across pretty much everything. Banks are still a little sticky, but especially in the hemp space, that's getting a lot better. A lot more banks are willing to openly work with hemp companies. Ratio type 1 recreational grows still have an issue with banking, but in the hemp space, it's pretty easy now. So we've seen this almost what feels like a complete 180 from don't tell anybody what you're doing, keep it quiet, even if it was medically legal, just keep it quiet, don't tell anybody, be secretive, to now share all the information and everybody's on board and let's do this. And it's a really dramatic change and a dramatic thing to watch happen. It's great though.
That is a
Right.
funny thing that we see happening is everybody from the past had a moniker or a username, or they were known by a nickname, and now we see everybody coming out and coming out with their real names. So like, oh, who's
Right.
that guy? Oh, you know,
Well,
you know him as Fat Buds 420 or whatever.
you're a fat blunt 420. I didn't even know. You know, like. Well, Annie Epley, who is the founder of Queens of Cannabis, she was on, and she used the term. She came out of the cannabis closet. You know, when she first came out to kind of talk about it, and it's great. I mean, to you guys' point, it's just great that people are so open, much more open to talk about. You know, hemp and cannabis and the medicinal benefits and even the opportunities that it can do for the economy, you know. Um, so I have a couple more questions here. So you mentioned, Adam, you mentioned how horticultural lighting has really kind of evolved really quickly as well in the last couple of years. So you want to talk about maybe some light spectrums that are best when cultivating CBD? Obviously, like you said, it depends on what you're wanting to do with the plant, but maybe share some examples.
So the most dramatic increase in quality of lights, we went, let's say, when Chris and I first met, you could pretty regularly get your hands on some like high pressure sodium lighting. Um, and then we came into like the dual ended lighting phase. So like Gavitas were big there for a while. And then you've always had LED trying to get into the space. And LED was kind of always the stepchild. Nobody really liked it. But now you're watching LED lights come into their own and be like super effective and really nice. So you're watching these different evolutions of the lighting, reducing energy requirements, reducing heat output, raising, penetration of the lights. Chris will be able to speak to this way better than I can. But for me, as far as like a spectrum of light goes, if you're going to run, and this is just through discussions and looking at what we're doing, if you're going to run a single spectrum all the way through veg to flower, like 4K is probably where you want to be. But if you want to do the traditional, blue light, orange light, veg flip, then it all seems to be fairly equally to me. But I love the idea of not taking down bulbs, taking down lights, doing all of that. I like the idea of being able to run the same spectrum from start to finish. But let me pass this over to Chris, because Chris is more of the light master than I am.
Well, lighting is a large and scientific subject for sure. Um, lightings come from in our earlier days when everything was measured in lumens, which is basically visible light. Um, and then, and once cannabis started to get a little bit more accepted and people were making lighting specifically for cannabis, they started to talk more about um, the specific spectrum that creates photosynthesis, or the spectrum that plants use for photosynthesis, um, which is called PAR. And that's a specific wavelength range from 400 to 700. And so lighting for a long time was really focused on just creating that light that was within that PAR range. But more recently, we've seen that other wavelengths of light have a large effect on the plant. And this is kind of the cutting edge of where science is right now, um, adding different spectrums outside the PAR range into your lighting. And of course, we know UV is responsible for THC production. So one of the big advances has been going towards adding more of that UV spectrum into late flowering to help convert some of those compounds into cannabinoids. Another one of the things that we see is LEDs are made to produce a single spectrum. So an LED is either blue, green, red, etc., and it's only producing one wavelength. So on that spectrum of 400 to 700, where photosynthesis happens, maybe you're hitting 400, you're hitting 500, 600, 700, say for example. If you put a plant into light that's like the sunlight, the sun's producing every spectrum, every one of those wavelengths and fractions of every one of them as well. And so that's something that man-made lighting has yet to reproduce. But it's all really fascinating. I think we're going to see some more interesting developments in spectrum and what it does for the plant.
That is exciting. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess to wrap it up, a normal person walking into a CBD shop, right? Obviously, with the over marketing that we've been hearing, some of these products, aren't at the percentage levels that they say they are. So, what can the average shopper look out for at these retail stores to quickly understand, hey, this product, is going to be true to what it's saying, or this might be all fluff and a bunch of marketing? Are there any indicators, or is there criteria that they can look out for?
I don't, if there's some Grim Reaper or a unicorn on the bottle and it's like, get high, bro. Like, it's hard. It's hard to say what is good and what is bad. It all comes down to an accurate lab test, right? Um, right now, the market is in such a place that lab tests don't have to be terribly accurate to release a CBD product. Um, Research, understanding who the companies are that you're buying products from, how they work, what they're doing, um, going and looking for companies that are sustainable, organic, do clean, good work, looking for products that are what is called full spectrum instead of isolate. We kind of touched on that earlier. Um, when they're making the oils to put into these products, to make it easy, a lot of times they will just isolate the CBD, remove that from the rest of the compounds, and create a CBD isolate product, which is rich in CBD but nothing else. No terpenes, no flavonoids, no other cannabinoids, just CBD. And cannabis works much better, and a lot of people use the word entourage effect or companion effect, but when these different compounds are working together, you get a much better medicine or a much better effect out of those products than isolating parts. So like THC isolate, for example, if you've smoked that or tried that, it's a very generic high. Like, you're stoned, but there's really not much more to it. Same with CBD. When you take CBD, you get that effect of CBD isolate, but there's really not much more to it. So a huge part of the cannabis plant and why people want to use CBD products is we have a lot of pain management in this country, a lot of opiate addiction, things like that. And so they're looking for a product, an anti-inflammatory product, to maybe get off of painkillers or to reduce inflammation, things like that. Well, that happens more so in the terpene profiles of the plants, or even with the other cannabinoids, but like beta myrcene or something like that. When you're removing these compounds from the plant to make an isolate, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater on it. You need to maintain the highest level of all of the additional parts, and that's where you can really get into kind of specific medicine making, even though you can't legally say this is good for this or this is good for this. But if you want to work with sleep and trying to do sleep therapy and things like that, well, having a high amount of CBN in your product is probably a good thing. If you're working with neurodegenerative diseases and trying to do some work in that space, having a high amount of CDC in your product is probably a good thing. If you're looking to reduce or stop seizures, having CBDVA in your products is probably a good thing. And these things don't have to be in huge amounts. Just the fact that they exist there completely changes the profile of the plant. So when you're looking at these products on the shelf, do research on the companies, make sure that, because there still are a lot of companies that are like importing isolate from Eastern Europe or India or China and turning them into bulk products and putting them on the shelves. And when they're sitting there in extremely nice packaging next to the other thing in really nice packaging, it's, a lot of people will buy based on marketing or based on first impressions, based on packaging. And so it's hard to know what you're getting without doing a little research. And any CBD company making products that's worth anything, if you contact, let's say, their customer service or somebody in the company and you ask for test results on those products, they'll absolutely provide them for you. So getting an idea of exactly what's in that medicine, exactly what the test results look like, and looking for a full spectrum product, I say would be a great place for people to start educating themselves and starting.
Yeah,
Well said.
agencies out there that do third-party testing, and a lot of CBD companies or hemp product companies will say that they have third-party testing, but watch out for that. Third-party testing is kind of a buzzword because a lot of the labs are friends with the farms, etc.
Or you could pay for
Can't really be
results.
trusted, but find an outside company that does tests on hemp products as a true separate third party. And I'd say also look for companies that are vertically integrated so that they are responsible for growing the product that they're using, and they're not picking it up off of the market at the cheapest price that they can just so they can make their product.
That's great advice, guys. Yeah, so do your research, avoid buzzwords, and bottles that contain Grim Reaper or unicorns, things of that nature.
Who knows? It might be great. I don't know.
It could be. You never know.
The Grim Reaper unicorn brand's probably fantastic.
If you try it, you're going to have to let me know how it is.
Sure, if I find it, yeah.
Yeah.
I made it up in my head, but it's one of those things. If you can think of it, it already exists, right?
That's right. That's right. Hey, well, Adam, Chris, it looks like we're coming up at the end of time here, but I want to thank you guys so much for sharing your tremendous wealth of knowledge around hemp cultivation and genetics. It's been a great conversation, and yeah, anything you want to leave the audience with?
It's been great talking to you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We're talking about lighting. I didn't get a chance to mention the Tall Trees lights that we've been working with, which really are the best LEDs that we've seen to date.
Chris, we're going to have to get you on again to talk about, obviously, Adam, you're welcome also, but we want to talk about lighting in more depth. We could always do that. So we'd love to have you back
Chris
on.
and I probably have another 500 hours of things to talk with you about, so have us back anytime. we scratched the surface today, and those were some good questions, and I think there's a lot of good information in there, but if you ever want to expand on anything or talk about anything else, we really have our fingers in just about every part of this industry, from nutrients to lighting to genetics. Obviously, we specialize in genetics, but we pride ourselves on being knowledgeable about pretty much everything in the industry. So please have us back. I love sharing and educating. I think that's the way that we get the country to a better understanding of what this plant actually is, how harmless this plant actually is, and educating people on what is safe ways to use this product, and for farmers, what are good methods and good genetics and things. So we love to share information, and we love to help and assist as much as we can.
I appreciate that. Yep, and that's the mission here at Cannabinoid Connect, is just providing that education and information. Just discussion's good, and it's the only way at this point where we can really start to understand how this plant works and its benefits. So,
Absolutely.
Cool, guys. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.